Hey everybody, and welcome to my master research presentation. This study uses a self-experiment to investigate the extent to which creative processes and compositional development can be fostered by focusing on a visual stimulus. In the course of my existence as an artist, I have noticed that in my case the development of new song ideas often emerge from a system of try and error, or by contrast is based on a very theoretically heady approach. This study aims to give a methodical approach to the generating of new ideas in order to take away a certain arbitrariness from it, but at the same time intends to give the right ground to an intuitive way of working. At its core, this work documents the transformation process of an acoustic stimulus into its visual illustration on which the creation of new music is based. These processes are accompanied by a collection of inspirational influences that significantly contributed to the shaping of the applied methodology. In the following, we will take a closer look at it. My original idea to study the music of Esperanza Spalding was based on my enthusiasm for her diverse musical ideas. I tried to understand in music theory what exactly I liked about her music and to incorporate these elements into my own work in a modified form. At the same time, I noticed that the compositional approach of wanting to sound like inhibited a creative flow more than it encouraged it. Also, the sudden obligation to deal with a specific branch of music gave me the feeling of limiting myself. So I decided to broaden the focus of my work to other artists who are a source of inspiration for me as well. First, the question arose which form of analysis to choose in order to get to the bottom of the particular qualities that attract me to music. To get closer to my targeted state of creative flow, a more unconventional method had to be used than transcription. I grew up in an artist's household, and the occupation with colors, painting, and design dominated my free time from an early age. I would often paint while listening to music, and after a while would emerge back into reality as if I was waking up from a trance state. I'm convinced that this state of being completely absorbed in the creative action is the sweet spot of where good music is created. However, I am also aware that this impression is merely the result of a subjective attitude. The idea of using visualization as a transcribing element was born. To further define the methodology of my study, the question arose as to whether it would be necessary to commit to a particular type of visualization or whether it could be kept variable. Besides painting music, techniques such as stop motion, using green screen, and animation tools, photography or video shoot could be considered. Since I have been involved a lot with the creation of music videos and animation in other projects, I was eager to learn more in this area and first discussed the possible use of 3D graphic software such as Blender. But soon it turned out that the operation of the program would go beyond the time frame of the project and would distract the focus from the musical work. During my research on the internet, I became aware of an artist, Melissa McCracken, who has a big repertoire of songs on her website, which she has interpreted in picture form. Her trademark is a certain spatula technique, and I really enjoyed browsing through her song list, and I felt confirmed in the idea to reproduce music through something painted. Due to time constraints and the time-consuming implementation, I decided to limit my analysis of selected songs to paintings. I worked digitally with the Apple iPad, including Apple Pencil, with the software Procreate. Actually, dealing with Esperanza Spalding's music should still be an important part of my work, since I did my first visualization of a song based on her composition Heaven and Pennies. I filmed the creational drawing process in real time to make one last attempt to incorporate the element of animation into my work. It pretty much mirrors the energetic progression of the piece. While the verse seems more wavy to me, opening up a natural, warm and earthy color spectrum. The chorus looks for a striking and expressive color scheme. Just as the music wants to be loud, I chose the most garish and prominent color to mirror the musical energy level. The lines and patterns happen partly in unison with the rhythmic movements of the music, but on the other hand, I did less thinking here and let myself drift more creatively. Inspired by Heaven and Pennies, I wrote a song that makes it its mission to create a suspenseful A part, leading into a semi-releasing B part. Both parts have a preparing function for the releasing C part, starting approximately at 60% of the form progression. This part is influenced by Heaven and Pennies and is characterized by focusing the ninth over a major 7 chord. I find this timbre to be very wide and open, but at the same time having a strong leading function and shows itself with an urge of musical repetition. My composition is called Hidden Path, and we recorded it with the Master Bands in 2021. In terms of my methodological approach, this transformation process had some obstacles when it came to creating music based on a visual stimulus. Setting an animation to music means following a certain plan that doesn't allow a musical idea to deviate a lot from the given energetic and formal structure. Composing a whole song based on a video of 6 minutes has the potential of being a research topic on its own. In addition, the musical realization lacked traceability and does not necessarily have to be associated with the visual starting point itself. The resulting composition was rather oriented to the self-assigned task of bringing the element of tension and release to the fore. For the further development of my methodology and to ensure a realistic transmission from visual to auditory, the transformation from now on should be in the form of motionless paintings. Jacob Collier's music has accompanied me for several years and keeps fascinating me with each new piece of music. His collaboration with Becca Stevens produced the song I Heard You Singing. This one already put me in a state of flow due to its lullaby character. Harmonically, it frequently leaves its lulling regularity, but the swaying 5/8 beat still forms the driving, chiming element. In the painting process, it was initially mainly colors to capture the basic warm mood. The swaying, lulling feeling moves from the background to the fore. From my point of view, the combination of different shades of orange and blue-violet seemed to be fitting the mood. The uniform interlocking patterns, which flowed like waves across the sky, gave me the sense of rhythm again, in which I lose myself while listening. The central element forms a radiant door, mirroring the closing section of the song, which adds a new energy and intensity to the entire piece. Despite this strong musical movement, I felt the need for a static symbol. Now it seems to me as if it gives even more vividness to everything that happens around and leaves room for interpretation to the viewer. Room for interpretation was also given for the subsequent improvisation phase. My approach here was to read my picture like our musical notation, from left to right. I led melody lines along clear linear patterns, but from halfway through the picture I felt completely lost and constrained by my own visual guidelines. Nevertheless, various motives emerged from my improvisation, and one of them clearly led in a direction I wanted to go further. Methodically, it seemed to make sense to base harmonic structures on the given color scheme. With some temporal distance, I have therefore added an improvisation session on the piano. The fusion of both improvised elements worked very well right away, creating a clear atmosphere that solidified my song idea. had a chat with my research coach Helen Swoboda about trends and anomalies during my composition processes. Very often I start a composition with chords that come to me when I play the piano, but with the latest songs I've written in 2021, I've turned it around. The words flowed from somewhere and I started composing with a clear idea of what my song wanted to say. The songs were finished faster and the compositions were more cohesive. In the actual case, I had already found melodic motives to my painting, and I was asking myself, how do lyrics arise from a picture? Where are the connections between what I see and what I think? Maybe the first step should be to collect associations and then start improvising? Helen has given me an exercise, collecting associations over 3 minutes that come to my mind when I look at my picture. Here are a few words that came out of it for I Heard You Singing. Fluffy, interrupted, unclear, together or against each other, heaven on earth, veiled, warm, open, wide, upside down, soil, continuous. The last two painting processes triggered a more realistic view of my previous approach. While these first attempts has been rather intuitive and schematic, now the question of repeatability came into focus. The relation between the original song, the visualization, and my composition had to become visible and comprehensible for an outside person. The goal was now to establish a fixed visual scheme for the 4 basic elements of harmony, melody, rhythm, and lyrics. My system can be summed up to the following clues. The harmonies are represented as colored areas. From a subjective point of view, I would assign bright and warm colors to the major tonalities, dark and cool colors rather to the minor spectrum. Changes in the color gradient refer to harmonic changes or modulations. The melody is made visible as a white or salient line that stands out clearly from the colored background. The rhythmic element turns out to be the most challenging aspect. How do you emphasize movement in a motionless picture without annotated language? I decided to put the rhythmic element to the back and trust that the improvised melodic input would provide enough rhythmic information to shape the composition to that end. The development of the lyrical element is already established by a 3-minute association session following the completion of the painting. In the course of my methodological discovery process, I philosophized a lot about improvisation and my first point of contact. When it came to finding an entrance to jazz improvisation, my former teacher, Reinette van Zijtveld-Lustig, asked me to imagine an empty room with a beautiful view. Now I should slowly fill it with my furniture and move one thing after another inside the room until I liked it. In the end, it was about the basic principle of creating, dealing, varying, and adapting motives. This technique of connecting improvisation with an everyday example, easy to visualize in front of the inner eye, taught me a more unencumbered approach to improvisation than the theoretical function harmonic one did later. At that point, I started to consciously bring this dealing with motives into my methodological approach. As soon as I no longer try to mirror a complete song in a visually perfect way, more intuitive, creative processes emerged and I entered improvisation with a different attitude of expectation. It was way easier to listen to myself while I was busy processing the visual stimuli. During the further processing of the improvisation, it became clear that no coherent song emerges from the improvisation phase. One idea follows the next, and it resembles a collection of inspirational possibilities, which make it much easier to get started with the composition itself. When I was listening to my improvisation several times, ideas crystallized more and more clearly that were not identified as such in the effect. When I listen to the recordings with a little offset, it almost feels as if a person from the outside is giving me new musical impulses that I can use for my current composition. In summary, the methodical process of this study can be divided into the following steps. First, the transformation of a selected piece of music into a painting. The focus is on a particular motive. This can be of melodic or rhythmic nature and is made clear within the painting as a clearly foregrounded element. The harmonics are mirrored in the color scheme, and finding new lyrics is based on a subsequent association phase of 3 minutes, which happens on the basis of the visualization. In the best case, a hook line or thematic idea emerges directly from the resulting thoughts. To ensure a better orientation in more abstract illustrations, the possibility of a simple task occurs, such as design a baseline that follows the linear form on the left edge of the picture. Second, the improvisation phase follows. This can be done by voice or any other instrument. Here as well, the setting to music of clear motives and their free further development is the guiding element. Thirdly, based on the resulting improvisation, a coherent melodic, harmonic, or rhythmic structure can now be developed. This either goes back to a given motive or makes direct use of a longer improvised phrase. I am aware of the fact that this procedure cannot be applied to any other person, instrument, or particular life situation, and primarily reflects my subjective experiences and actions. Based on this methodical concept, further transformation processes emerged, and I would like to give a brief insight into some of them. With developing the idea of the motivic approach and combining it with a simple self-assigned task, I dedicated myself to one of my favorite songs, Gotta Be Another Way by Louis Cole and Genevieve Artadi. Recently, I had discovered that Bob Mintzer arranged this song for WDR Big Band, and I chose this version for my next transforming process. I took a closer look at the melodic concept of Gotta Be Another Way and noticed that the sequence of notes in the chorus melody repeats itself raised a semitone, as well as the sequence of notes in the bridge recurs shifted down a whole tone. I have now drawn the course of the melody of the chorus in a double line, which moves from the left edge of the picture to beyond the upper edge of the picture. The double line illustrates the repetition of the main motive. The white lines in the lower left quarter depict the movement of the bridge melody. Gotta Be Another Way is strongly influenced by the element of modulation, so I set out to develop a melody line that remains the same in its interval sequence, but transposes upwards. Live your mistakes awesomely, there's no need for apologies. You don't have to go down in history. Cheers on your mediocrity. The Portuguese artist Maru has started a pretty cool project with the beginning of the corona pandemic. It's me, Maru. For this, she called artist friends to make music with them. The result is a lot of nice collaborations, and all videos can be watched on her YouTube channel. I was especially touched by her conversation with Jacob Collier. The two covered the song Meadowlarks by Fleet Foxes. Their version creates an extremely peaceful atmosphere and inspired me to set myself the task of writing a song that has an absolutely non-melancholic mood. At this point, it occurred to me that I haven't written many peaceful songs that don't have a tendency towards melancholy, and I wondered which songs I know are coming up with this characteristic. A genre whose greatest quality is to evoke as little goosebumps and emotions as possible, but to gently put its listener into a calm, neutral relaxation, is that of lullabies. So, out of an instrumental improvisation, a small lullaby idea resulted. Likewise, under this aspect, I approached the visualization of the song. To me, it seemed too clumsy to make the melody voice clear by a disconnected line. so I illustrated it as the curse of a mountain range. The positive, gentle atmosphere is mixed with polyphony, marked by tensions, which give the whole thing a slightly surreal character. This is how the futuristic-looking lark, in the form of a spaceship with a breathing organ, came into being. One of the albums I have probably listened to most often and most actively is Silva by Snarky Puppy. The lively and brassy arrangement first made me give the background a color scheme of very warm orange and red tones. For the contrasting patterns in the left foreground, I took as inspiration the bass line heard in the solo part. Its driving character and simple movement and second steps are roughly mirrored here visually. My self-assigned task for this painting is to develop a bass line that follows the painted pattern. I kept to the downward movement in second steps and added a fast 8th note movement in the end. In fact, I tried to keep it puristic in this painting and have quite trivially picked up the element of the moon because everything the night sky has to offer somehow inspires me when painting. I took this thought further and created a creature, an old, wise, tired creature that is friendly towards life, a loving higher power. Below the moon and the starry sky being lies a city. The city visualized the melodic movement of Laura Mvula's Sing to the Moon. Information about the intervals can be found in the height of the buildings. Buildings not filled in white symbolize sustained notes. The simple task I set myself for this picture was let your melody follow the movement of the skyline. Straight and tangled, star-spangled, you've lived so many lives. Straight and tangled, star-spangled, you've seen so many souls. Straight and tangled. Last year my song Hidden Path was created as part of the master bands. Due to the corona situation, we spent a whole day recording the songs that were created instead of doing a final concert. This year it was going to be different, and we spent 1 month rehearsing a set of original compositions of the master students, which were about to see the light of day in a final concert. And I thought about using this project to put my method of sound-based visuals into a larger framework. The improvisation in the group. In the period of 1 month, I animated another video on which the upcoming improvisation should be oriented. I've worked out several possible scenarios for this improvisation experiment to take place and decided to let the performance retain the value of the unmediated and not constructed. The group of master students should see the visualization in the concert situation for the first time. I divided them into 2 groups and let them improvise one after the other to make the amount of people playing appropriate. Lest We Forget by Esperanza Spalding, and to be found on her album 12 Little Spells, has been floating around in my head for a while as a well-visualizable song. The clear melody line is in favor of an equally clear drawing on atmospheric ground. I dealt with the latter first by choosing a blue foundation, which gets something earthy through the use of a certain structure. At this point, the working title Soil was created. After I decided not to meticulously mirror what I hear, the white melody line that I animated in the animation software Flipperclip follows Esperanza Spalding's vocals only in its basic movement and does not run perfectly synchronized with the vocal movement. Both movements are nevertheless perceived as belonging to each other. The already established melody line now appears once again in a different color and plays differently in the image. A third line joins it in a different form and color, like a kind of echo. It occurred to me that Spalding's melody could be placed in a canonic context, so I established this idea for the subsequent improvisation. At this point, I realized that I was already dealing with the compositional process, in that I was already influencing the course of the improvisation in advance through the use of fixed melody lines, color changes, and the progression of the form. This experiment resulted in 2 very exciting and completely different improvisations, which can be viewed in full length on my blog. Unfortunately, a more detailed documentation of the project is beyond the scope of this presentation. For me, it was a fascinating experiment, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow students for getting so involved with my project and enriching my research with their creativity. In addition to some compositional inspirations I have drawn from this experiment, I am convinced that soil and the concept of bringing visuals to music has a special pedagogical value and proves to be a playful method to introduce free improvisation to young students or people interested in jazz in a less academic way. Also, in the context of a songwriter circle or workshop, the method could be applied and influence the overall dynamic within the group in a positive way. For this purpose, certainly many kinds of animated or even naturalistic videos can be chosen. It does not necessarily have to be in line with an improvisation project, but they should still follow a certain artistic standard to give the right basis for a free improvisation. The simplification of a simple task provides the security of an anchor point during the free improvisation, while room is also given to all subjective interpretations of the visuals. The visual stimulus may also prevent the fear of running out of ideas and favors the creation of a non-judgmental atmosphere. In summary, this master research project produced 7 paintings and 2 videos, a series of improvisations, 6 completed compositions, as well as an additional lyrical sketch and a pedagogical improvisation concept. The majority of this outcome occurred within a period of a few months. The procedure is repeatable in its flow and at the same time ensures new inspirations and thus new output. The method can be modified and possibly promises inspirational value for other musicians as well. On days when I could not speak the musical language fluently or found composing difficult, painting has functioned as a translation for me. It maintained to promote creative state of mind and greatly facilitated subsequent ideation on musical level. Described from a comprehensive perspective, in my methodology, a musical impulse is absorbed via a projection surface, represented by my visualization, thus performs a metamorphosis, radiates and gives rise to something new. Transferred into a philosophical interpretation, my approach can be seen as a functional prism. Everything that has an origin and an end needs a projection surface to transform. A question that is asked is processed and an answer can be given. The oblique projection reflects the original stimulus and gives it a new vitality. Concerning the creation of my compositions, it has to be said that there was some distance between my improvisations and its development into a song idea. The song ideas actually all came up very quickly, one after the other, within a week. This one very intensive creative week has surprised me extremely positively and confirmed a positive effect of my method. Using my improvisations as the basis for a new musical idea gave me the feeling of having myself as a source of inspiration rather than the original impulse of already existing music. My improvisation assumed the function of an external impulse here. Seen from this perspective, a musical dialogue seems to emerge that prevents a state of spinning one's own thoughts in circles. I come to the conclusion that one primary goal is to counteract the fear of the blank page, to make a start and to develop a basic idea that does not yet dwell on details. Furthermore, I see some beneficial value, especially in terms of inspiration on a lyrical level. On the other hand, the element of painting also involves some time investment that doesn't go directly into making music per se. So in the future, I would like to try out whether a pared down version in the form of sketching would have a similar effect. From a psychological point of view, I have to admit that I am not only confronting myself with the demands of a musical idea and the performance of it, I also bring an aesthetic demand to my paintings into this working process. Even though I enjoyed the artistic realization, the incentive to compose becomes smaller if I am not completely convinced or on some level satisfied by the visual appeal. But what I could clearly reflect on is the fact that it is better to compose something and not being completely satisfied than to compose nothing at all. I've been able to shed a certain attitude of demanding about my writing and realize that setting unfinished fragments of ideas to music paves the way to the good ideas. It is a mental orientation to creativity that I would like to continue working on in the future, one that lives less from doggedness and being goal-orientated, but rather brings the process of creative work into consciousness. Last but not least, I would like to invite you to my final concert, where the finished songs from my research project will find their way onto the stage for the first time. Thank you for your attention.
welcome in the live room at the Conservatorium Maastricht, where we are now going to continue with the Q&A of Sarah Witaszek's presentation. Of course, we would like to encourage you to put your questions as well in the chat on the YouTube live stream. And I would like to invite you, Sarah, to come here. So yeah,
Hi, Sarah.
Nice to see you.
we have one online jury member all the way from down under, from Australia, and who is also Sarah's coach. So I would like to ask you, Helen, if you could ask your first question.
Yeah.
I just want to start by saying what a wonderful presentation, Sarah. It was just so enjoyable to watch all of that in a visual space. And, you know, I've seen it on your blog, but just to hear you talking about it in that format was just really wonderful. So congratulations. I have just two questions, and you may have already touched on it. So forgive me if you have, but it's something that I feel I wanted a little bit more info on. I guess you had a really fantastic system for, you know, identifying those different visual elements and like translating them into music. So you mentioned the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, and the lyrics. And I'm really interested in the form as well, like in, I guess, thinking about the compositions that came out. Did you find that you still ended up following more of like a songwriting form where there was a verse, there was a chorus, or did you find that the forms of the different compositions differed for each one depending on the painting? So there might have been some that were through composed, some where you, like you said, you might have had a motive that informed a particular section. I'm just quite interested to know that.
I think that was what you said last. Wow, now I forgot what you said. I actually didn't think a lot about form because this one motive I focused on was the guiding element to go further with it. And especially the bass line I composed were the main element, and so I put it on the beginning to see where it leads from there, and afterwards I recognized it would be a great foundation for a hook line or a chorus because it was so prominent, and so I combined it, and the initial idea of bringing this bass line into a song idea, it matched with the chorus, and from that point on it was a floating situation.
No.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's really clear. I was just more interested. I think that could be really interesting to think, you know, for future research as well. There's limited scope in 2 years, but there might be even more elements through the painting that inform different elements of like a pre-composed form and things like that as well.
Actually, in the beginning, my plan was to direct the whole song from left to right over the picture, but it was simply too complicated to stuck with this idea. It was too much to
totally
think about and compose on. Yeah.
And like you said at the beginning as well, there's limited scope in 2 years of what you can do. So that's totally understandable and, you know, expected. I just, I was interested. And I think there's so many spaces where that can build with just many more years of doing this. So yeah, that's great. And I'm also interested, you know, this is quite close to, I think we talked a little bit about graphic scoring, you know, the different ways of communicating this on paper in compositional mode. And of course, identifying that, you know, the painting is quite time consuming. So in terms of, you know, translating your ideas through more sketch-based approach is more efficient with time. Have you thought about you know, moving into a graphic scoring space with that as well as a potential? Like, you know, you have these clear elements that could be translated into a key, like you've got lines, like not a key like a key center, but, you know, particular symbols that can translate ideas onto a page into a visual sense. So, you know, you might have lines and you might have like the different color palettes and things like that. Do you see a correlation or like a relationship between, you know, the sketching that you mentioned and graphic scores that might eventuate out of this?
I think here again the focus on develop motives is the main thing, because it's easier to have this anchor point of a small motive and go further, and just to sketch with a pen a certain line, a melody line or something, would help here.
Yeah, no, that's clear. So it's more used as a tool as like a launching pad for a compositional idea, and then outside of that, that's when the future notation comes in. Yeah, wonderful. They were my main two questions, but yeah, thank you for those answers.
Thank you for
Great.
asking.
Greg, do you have a question?
Yeah, two. Let's see. We'll manage. So, pretty connected to Helen's question. So, I'm curious about the process of transformation. So, painting was your transformation process. You mentioned those four aspects like harmony, melody, rhythmics. Let me see. Lyrics, right? Okay. I would be curious about the order. So, you did 7 paintings or something like this, and like 5 compositions or
6 compositions and 7 paintings. One painting was nice, but I don't wanted to compose something on it.
Yeah, I would be curious about this. You already have some experience. That was 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. Could you say something about the order? So I would be curious with what were you starting again with motives, the melody. After completing this 7 paintings, maybe you could already have something what you like already as an order, and also the compositional process. Were you starting again with more like form, or more like what was the order? Harmony, melodies.
Maybe it's interesting to say that similar to my further composition processes, I had this start with my harmonies on the piano, and in parallel to this, I started with the harmonic color scheme in the beginning, because it was easier to create a melody line or a salient line on a colored background, but with this Sing to the Moon thing, there was my initial idea to mirror the melodic hook line of Sing to the Moon. So I started with the melody here with this city, and
So it was changing. You wouldn't get like some universal thing. It was actually on spot,
especially
pretty much.
Either harmonics or melodics were the first element that I go further with.
All right. And how about one last question? How about the painting process? Obviously, sometimes you're more satisfied from the effect or less satisfied. Did you create a very interesting composition out of maybe some more disappointing, effect in painting, or other way around? Or could you say something about this?
Actually, the Sing to the Moon melody wasn't a melody I would have composed without the painting, because it was more simple and static in some way. But somehow I kept it because it was my task to use this line. So I had to limit myself in this point, and maybe it helped me to create a melody line for once that is not complicated or disharmonic, what I did before, because I had this demand on melodies, and that's maybe a shitty thought as well, I don't know. But yeah, here I kept stuck on this line, and yeah, the rest of the song developed around this static melody line. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Cool. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my question is about your artistic process, and there seems to be something very interesting happening between intuitive process and analysis and more mind thought processes. And I was just wondering if you could reflect on two things. One, how would you describe how that relates to each other while it's happening? And also the other part is about documenting that. How was it for you to try to reveal both these sides?
Could you repeat the science?
Yeah, so the last part is, maybe we start with that one. How was it for you to reveal both the sides of the intuitive process and the thought process, you know, in this artistic process, you know, revealing it through your documentation? How was that working for you?
I think the thought process was to focus on one element that I hear in the song, like the melodic element of Gotta Be Another Way, for example, and that it has this whole tone and semitone movement, and I transcribed it a bit on the piano, so I prepared myself for drawing it in the end, so it was a bit constructed here.
Yeah.
And yeah, but beside this motive thinking, it was more intuitive around it.
Yeah, and how do you then, if you reflect on the intuition, right? How was your intuition influenced by your analytical pre-processes, or even while it happens?
I think this it was a bit difficult to choose the right colors, so I wanted to keep on this plan to symbolize minor tonalities with dark and cool colors, and major tonalities with warm and bright colors. But at some point I had the feeling I had to choose another color, because that was what I heard in the song. It's hard
so
to describe.
So you noticed conflicts, actually.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Did that also occur with other things, like the way that you would, I don't know, because you had a process of this translation, which really, I guess the first start of it is like an idea, like which element do you even begin with? You know, are you going to choose a line, a color, a shape?
Yeah.
That's very intuitive, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is.
Where do you think these ideas came from?
A lot of the acoustic impulse that was the impulse that was the most prominent in my memory came to the fore. So either a harmonic spectrum that fascinated me, or one high note which was brilliantly sung or so, and I started with this. Is it an answer to your question?
It's very hard to answer this at all. It's just that it seems to be a very interesting fact about your research. One, you've done a great attempt at trying to reveal these processes in your blogs, but it's also there seems to be so much actually that you could discuss. You know, there's so much more going on than just what you managed to discuss. That I thought it was very interesting to reflect a little bit on this relation between the thinking and the intuitive doing, let me put it that way, you know, sort of the relation, and maybe conflicts, maybe helping of each other, of both sides.
Yeah, I think for the beginning I was really occupied by following my self-assigned tasks and keep it in a frame that is somehow describable and not confusion for myself, and to keep on track with my system at that point. And it was more about doing and creating at that point.
I'm gonna have a little look if anyone in the room would like to ask a question. Not jumping yet. Yeah, I see you jump. Here we go.
Are you a synesthesia person?
Sorry?
Like, you know, people who see, like, some, I don't have this, but some people literally see colors when they hear music. Are you that kind of person, or is this like?
I don't know. I have the feeling that an A has to be red,
Yeah,
something
me too.
like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
Cool.
Yeah. Or a 4 is red too.
And
I don't know
Would
why.
you ever come across situations where, like, the parameters that, like, for example, where you're saying more minor modes are in the cooler tones and etc. But if you have an A that you say is red, but it's in A minor, like, is that ever like a weird dissonance for yourself, or?
Now my first thought was violet because I mix red and blue, but maybe it's just my frontal.
That's very interesting. One final question about you of course were referring to a lot of artists through their music, right?
Yeah.
Because you used their music and you translated it and went from a process through your music in a prism concept, right? So it's really nice. But I was wondering if there was also some input coming more in the sense of maybe artists that you found that did similar processes using visuals in their development process of music.
Interesting. Not yet.
Was it?
I plan to focus on music that I not usually listen to and just take any acoustic impulse to visualize it. Besides my preparation for this kind of music, maybe it makes sense to go further with this idea to to discover other artists and other kinds of.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, of course, you're going into a realm of how you use visuals and music, basically inspiring each other, actually, right? And I was just wondering if you found any reference of other artists doing similar jobs.
I had to, but I could have had discovered something, but no, it was just me and this idea.
Okay. Great. Let's see if there's anything else being, brewing inside people here. No, we're good. Well, we're going to go into a recess and deliberate about your both your beautiful presentation and your answers here to the question. We will be continuing at 2:30. With the next master research presentation also of Nadine Kim. Thank you.
Every great research is based on the researcher's own problem resolution. When I first started this case study, I was struggling with jaw alignment issues. When a vocalist just focuses on intellectual, more external factors of singing, we often miss the signals of sensations of our own body. Unlike other instrumentalists, vocalists are living, breathing instruments. How do we forget these while improvising? How do we make this idea into useful study? There have been many diverse research and examples of lectures about vocal improvisation where I could find a great help within my research topic area. However, with this case study, I would like to dive deep into how to use my intuitive tools based on non-intuitive techniques and knowledge. I hope this research becomes a great foundation for helping singers to coordinate their biological instruments and great knowledge into more organic and natural sounding improvisation. You see, often in jam sessions or in ensembles, many vocalists hesitate to improvise. In my very personal observations during my bachelor's and master's study, many of us have an idea that improvisation is only for those who are very gifted. Where do these generalizations and fears come from? Meanwhile, instrumentalists have no hesitation to interact with each other in music by improvising. What makes us different from the rest of the jazz instrumentalists? The most ironic part of this discussion is that we all know music equals language. As a vocalist who speaks and sings the lyrics, why are we creating these restrictions and judgments for ourselves? How can I acquire the freedom of improvisation as a vocalist? In the beginning, I simply thought my shortage of knowledge in theoretical form made me insecure to improvise. However, in reality, in the singing lessons, they use fewer theoretical tools compared to instrumentalists. For instance, name of the chords, leading notes, indicating tensions, or simple notations on the lead sheet even. One of the examples of guidance I have tried was the series of Jamie Ebersold, well-respected and popular improvising guide for the beginner since 1967. This book also has drums and double bass recording as an ensemble exercise for further studies. The main topic of this series is focused on improving and expanding your vocabulary meaning by playing repetitive and structured exercises to help one's motive development skills. However, to accomplish what's suggested, it requires a certain technique of the instrumentalist. I quickly came to the conclusion that the book is quite unkind to vocal improvisers' vocal cord, and it can lead one into playing fixed exercises in very limited ways when you are just a beginner. What I experienced personally was that I noticed myself only focusing on how to perfect and sing those exercises accurately, rather than understanding the examples with my ears musically. It gave me a great number of restrictions, having a horizontal view over the chord progressions. Furthermore, these technical issues occurred again when applying Michel Vier's Judy Nimex, Damon Midders, and many more. At this point, I was searching for how to approach this topic more intuitively than scientifically or theoretically, which led me to start from an even smaller perspective to find a better resolution. Those who want to improvise with great skill require the discipline of mastering one's own instrument and understanding the styles of jazz they would like to pursue. Therefore, I directed myself in finding core sounds as a vocalist to master my own body sensations and moreover improve my grammar in the language of jazz. For this research, I have used a practice-based approach with a focus on sound and jazz theory application. Notable exercises and focus areas include finding the core tone, solfege, 30-30, improvisations with drums, and pre-written improvisation. Finding the core tone, the four-speech subsystem. The technical difficulty was one of the most draining existing problems for me as a vocalist. Interestingly enough, fellow musicians and professors told me that I do not have those issues on a critical level. However, the issues were coming from the accuracy of the notes, less precise rhythm, and most importantly, those dearths of control directed into reducing my confidence as a musician. To consider the subject issues more in detail, I applied 3 systems of 4-speech subsystem from the research regarding speech motor function area as support. It has the 4 divisions of speech process as 1. Respiratory, 2. Phonatory, 3. Resonator, 4. Articulatory system. Respiratory system, breathing support. Our instrument is our body. How did I apply the first system into my techniques? What was the result of my build-up following the breathing support system? I started sports, specifically CrossFit, 2 to 4 times a week for more than a year. As a result, lung capacity was improved, breathing became easy, and the upper and lower body posture got better. These improvements helped to reduce the back and shoulder pain while sitting in front of the piano and practicing singing while standing. Above all, with the development of the most anticipated core, back, and lower muscles, I could have better breathing when singing. Resonator system, head resonance, nasal resonance. By way of the lesson with Susanna Schneider, I could find the most efficient resolution in my evidential technical issues of making darker and wider sounds than my original form. During this process, we used the NG sound to find the new resonance of the voice, also called mask resonance, and we practiced producing vowel sounds through the resonance point. As a result, the accuracy of the pitch was not only pleasantly improved, but also opened up the possibilities to make lighter sounds to produce a faster melody line. Articulatory system, articulation, vocal embouchure. Subject articulation is the biggest time I have invested in this research category. Let's look at the examples of wind instruments performers. They have a wide knowledge of how to make particular mouth shapes and tongue positions to control the sound of their instrument. As it is the most similar instrument that has the same core breathing function, isn't there any way I could apply the same method and find the best position for my own sound? My task was to hold the NG sound whilst producing the vowel sound in the same position. However, as it's a new resonance point, my facial muscles weren't familiar with the new technique, and because I was used to the old way of articulating darkly and heavily, that for example, all exercises had to be done slowly and repeatedly to stabilize the pitch of even for the simplest movement. To train the facial muscles to achieve different movements, I trained soft palate, orbicularis oris muscles, which is the one encircling the mouth, and buccinator muscles underlying the cheekbone. Jaw alignment resolution. In the beginning of this research, I mentioned briefly my jaw alignment issues. To elaborate more in detail, when I moved my head around, I often felt something was unnatural and very tense. I looked into my muscle movements, especially making vowel sounds, and found out something was disorientated. According to the chiropractor I had consultations with, orthodontic correction in your childhood can cause certain types of issues to few percentage of people. One of the issues that I had is when I open my mouth, my chin is in the S pattern rather than a normal C pattern, meaning if I want to open my mouth, it needs unnatural force as the upper and lower jaw abnormality of getting stuck in the joint. As luck would have it, the specialist could help correct my abnormal movement, and it gave an outstanding improvement in the middle part of my face muscles. As a result, it supported the movement to help be able to use the nasal resonance sound. Solfege, movable though. Most of my performance anxiety was coming from the concern of myself not being able to understand and feel comfortable with the sounds in actions, even though I had enough theoretical knowledge. In other words, having enough non-intuitive tools to explore and use in action, but not being able to reach the level of being intuitive and having freedom in music. Often, many graders have their ears trained to the same depth as their theoretical knowledge level or even higher level to have fluency in music when performing. As a musician, the artistry level we want to achieve is a natural and effortless playing rather than the playing that is overly calculated by being too conscious of the knowledge we obtained in the past. Let's talk about the characteristics of a vocalist as an instrument. Every instrument has different difficulties and ways of expanding its musicality to the maximum level. However, what they have in common is that they have the object, which is instrument, to be able to visualize the creation and see the result immediately, which gives a great balance and advantage of developing their external technique and internal knowledge. Simply saying, instrumentalists can have more direct confirmation of their work in each practice. But when we do not have the direct object to visualize our knowledge, since we can't open up our vocal cords to see how it's actually corresponding or pressing the key sound we make internally, what does a singer need to strengthen their greatest handicap into something greater and more unique? Solfege training is one of the most common alternative ways for vocalists to directly visualize the result of their creation. I was able to develop my listening ears by relearning the jazz standards melody with the solfege technique. This method became the bridge between the voice and the ears to separate the melody, which has been only recognized by lyrics, as an independent individual sound rather than a lyric-oriented phrase. 30-30. Often in ensembles, they require less repetitive and non-mechanical exercise for singers considering the nature of our organic instrument. However, the basic mistakes singers often have, losing chord progressions and not finding the right moment to enter again, constantly thinking about what's next, then losing the gravity of the flow of what you wanted to sing, etc. The biggest majority of reasons why musicians exercise the same thing over and over are coming from owning the music to be free and using our natural intuitive tools. I was keen on creating the approach that is similar to instrumentalists but simply made for singers considering our biological instrument's nature when it comes to studying improvisation. Here I came up with a very simple exercise called 30-30. Using the application made for jazz musician iRear Pro and exercising one's desired jazz standard for 30 courses, repeating for the next 30 days. 30 is just an estimated and recommended amount of times, but mostly you can gain an enormous understanding of one song halfway or even faster. Therefore, one can repeat as many or as comfortable times as possible depending on their condition. In my personal case, after 15 days, I could visualize the entire piece effortlessly in almost all aspects of what I wanted to achieve. Though you might question, what do you gain by exercising simple tasks repeatedly? The exercise is to create the base to help oneself to move forward toward the next complicated exercise. But even though I found the benefit of this exercise, in my situation at the moment, it was not as enjoyable, as the harmony moved too fast, too distracting, and unable to internalize the sound efficiently. While I was busy singing the important notes I was supposed to sing of the chords, it entered imitation territory somehow. The imitation was the initial goal to achieve virtuosity, but the creative rationale changed to focus on chord tone and personal voice, the nuance in my sound, which is micro details to make up my sound. Practice with cello drums. The best part of practice with a cello drum is that it helps you to connect to your body sensations and sensitivity more than other methods or exercises, as it creates more possibilities of chords. It naturally suggests and leads you up to explore more outsides of norm sounds rather than staying in the tonality. Also, in my personal experiences, I could feel the tendency of the previous note I sang and consciously choose the next one I would choose to sing. It can be looked over as regular voice leading studies. However, for me, being in touch with my sensation while singing without being self-conscious was definitely an extraordinary experience. In the past, I have learned to purposely avoid playing either roots or fifth, as they explain it limits you from defining the color of the chord. As I was just starting to begin as an improviser, as I had a quite narrow perspective as a student, I used to digest that small part of the bigger knowledge in a very small context. It unfortunately limited me for a long time moving forward with a deeper gain of knowledge, exploring the different sounds. Nevertheless, through this research, trying multiple methods and opening up to new possibilities freed me from those limits, I can confidently say. One of the most important things I learned from practicing this method was having a childlike playfulness without being too dependent on what we studied or know. Therefore, becoming free from your non-intuitive tools, it can indeed help you to explore the textures of the voice and micro nuance. Pre-written improvisation, less is more. Improvisation has always been an outstanding foundation of a composition. It is indeed a way to compose instantly. During my lesson with pianist Jin Kim, I received types of exercises that were made to be considered for singers and tasks that could help me to gain a perspective as an instrumentalist. I would like to demonstrate the result of On Green Dolphin Street and my composition Drive. If you consider improviser as an author and improvisation as a creating a short sentence developing into a bigger story, finding a motive for the solo is the beginning of the greater next chapter in this book. However, where do we find motives and how to develop them? Here in these examples, I use the elements of the sounds which are chord tone, scales, intervals, and voicing as resources. Once I changed my perspective into thinking improvisation is no longer a complex intellectual speech only, but rather telling a story to another musician, my solo started to make much more sense than just repeating what I learned in the past to impress one another in music. Focusing only on a high level and complicated improvisation can lead one into having a monologue in music rather than interaction. Visualizing the shape and structure helped me expand my voice range and helped me to understand having space to listen to the rest of the musicians. It creates a greater version of the story and suspense, understanding the basic foundation of music and owning the elements. Yes, less is more. If music is a language, what kind of author would I like to become in jazz? During this research, I asked this question multiple times to myself. When I started as a jazz musician, I was making compositions to impress other musicians. I wanted to improvise in a very complex and perplexing way to get validation and confirmations from anyone or even from myself. chasing after all the superficial and external values in music made me not being able to understand even the simple method. Or because of this narrow idea that was implanted in my brain, I would often not find the meaning of building a good foundation with the basics. How would anyone write a great story without having the right vocabulary, grammar, correct writing technique, dialect, or an accent you choose to have? As every person speaks one language to another differently with their unique character, what makes me a great musician is finding a way to express my unique self in the most natural and fluent way possible, like I speak my mother tongue. To sum up, I need to further identify what is holding me back and break this down into smaller steps to reach an end goal of comfort and new discovery. When I began this research, I wanted to examine the topic in depth and dive into it. But because there were way more unexpected comprehensive elements that needed to be addressed beforehand in order to study in detail, this research has become the stepping stone for the next milestone for my further growth rather than a completed ending. I am looking forward to my next journey together with this stepping stone. Thank you.
Welcome back, live at the Conservatorium of Maastricht Jazz Department, where we are now going to follow up with the Q&A. I would like to invite you all to drop your questions in the chat on YouTube. We will be able to read them out here. If you have a question for Nadim Kim, please come on stage. Thank you. All right, so welcome back, live at the Conservatorium of Maastricht. Is that yours or Helen's?
No, Helen's, I guess.
Maybe you can drop a note at her. Helen, I think your live stream is still on in your computer. Is it off? Thank you. All right, that can happen. So I was just going to say we have Helen Svoboda online on Teams, who has been your coach during your research, and I would like to ask her to ask the first question.
Hi, Narim.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Yeah, wonderful to see your presentation. Thank you for that. I guess my first question is, I guess, you know, in the nature of artistic research, it's quite individual, of course, in the topics that are discussed. But do you feel that this, you know, as a resource, as you build upon more components of your own vocal journey and, you know, the issues surrounding the differences between, say, an instrumentalist as opposed to the less visual approach of sound making that you have as a vocalist, do you find that do you believe that this will develop into quite an important pedagogy for yourself as a teacher? You know, when you're teaching other vocalists, do you find that this will form an important part of your, you know, sharing of knowledge, and that this is, I guess, applicable to other vocalists across those different elements, especially, you know, the core tone, finding that core tone, translating, you know, ideas in a more intuitive way. I guess, how do I ask that better? do you intend to use this in your teaching as a pedagogical method outside of just the individual experience?
Yes, definitely.
Sorry, I said many words then, but
Yeah,
I hope that makes
my
sense.
answer is yes. When I was struggling, all the process actually, and my goal was what I thought was how would have taught myself in the past what would save my time, not like this. So yeah, it was useful time to check smaller steps. And for example, this specific jaw alignment problem, obviously not many people would have it, but it was nice to check this small thing we wouldn't think of about could affect on entire life. That could drain the passion for music. So, and also this chord tone, I was really glad to work on that part because regardless of style of music, before we know about our own sound, how can we do sing a note? So that was really great great foundation to anybody who wants to sing.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned, out of the different elements of your, exploration, with the 30-30, which we talked about, in some of our meetings, would you ever consider with that one, because, you mentioned it got quite technical and it, became more of an imitation based approach rather than intuitive. Would you ever think of, returning to that as an idea with just the repetition in mind, but across chordal, movement that is less fast moving? So, with less harmonic material, but more just like internalizing, say, particular chord progressions in smaller forms. So it might not be a 32 bar form, but you might, choose to return to an 8-bar progression also. Do you think that might be something that might change the efficiency of that exercise and allow you to be more intuitive in approaching that?
Yeah, still I think that the methods is nice because for me the number like 30 gave me a specific goal before just noodling around some chords, and just maybe I would choose the slow tempo, but still I will return that because I would like to interact with other musicians in jazz standards, which is common form, universal form in jazz. So, like in this pre-written solo, I work on Green Dolphin Street, twice longer bars. I put different arrangement. So that's, I will return to 30-30 soon, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, all good. I was just more curious because I think it's definitely a method that can be, changed around to suit what the individual needs, of course, for in terms of what you're wanting to get out of it, whether you're learning the melody or whether you're getting your head around the harmony. So yeah, I was just more interested, but that clarifies. But yeah, thank you.
So let me follow up with one. So I was wondering, you're only several days, I think, before your final exam for your voice main subject. Yeah. And I was wondering if this research has changed your way of approaching preparing for that.
Yes. but not really as an improviser. But I wrote pre-written solo. I could not have chosen that way, but I wanted to do so. My misunderstanding was like, oh yeah, I need to improvise, real improvisation. I should do that. I forced in that way. So like without this stepping stone.
Yeah.
And then now I'm fine with more musical way. Then like I should do this, or that's written solo is not good. No, it's from my brain, so it's my music anyway. So I prepare some tune in that way, and also some on composition that I chose more funky notes, but it was easy to learn with solfege. So to check the connection with bass and then what the function in the chord.
Yeah.
So it was easier to memorize, actually.
Yeah.
So yes.
And the first aspect of your that you presented in your methodology was about sound. How is that contributing to this?
I had confidence.
Okay.
Yeah, so I could enjoy myself much more than before. Yeah, that's really great part from this research, really.
And does it actually also influence the color of your voice, what you have discovered, or is it something more about freedom, or how does it work exactly, the result?
Yeah, I was worried, like, what if I change something? What if my color of voice changed, which I had before? But the color, in my opinion, color is same, but just way of express. For example, I mentioned like I used to sing darker and heavier than my original voice. I have more options to express. Like now I can make lighter sound and heavier sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. I would have a question. It's
Go
okay.
ahead.
About you mentioned a couple of technical aspects like breathing in, soft palate, and all the aspects. I would be curious. About your routine. Like, how was it before before the research? How structured you were, and your like warm up routines. How is it right now? Imagine that you have like an hour, 1.5 hour of time to practice. Let's say tomorrow, maybe today, not anymore. How would you divide it actually? So think about like you're limited with time. How would you divide this 1.5 hour? What exercise would you do? What exercises are really important for you right now?
Yeah. I would do more nasal resonance.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, maybe I can demonstrate here, like
Great.
the octave switching, like let's say 1 to 8, up and down, because in that way, smoothly going up and down, when I came down, I found that my core has to support, otherwise the tone is really like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this thing, and with this higher range, which I don't have before, so I had to explore before rehearsal. That's the essential part of my, let's say, routine. I don't have a real routine, but that's what I need, definitely, in a short time.
Okay. And how would you divide it? You would spend like 15 minutes on this, or 10 minutes, or imagine like you have like.
Yeah, I obsessed. Actually, I really like practicing because every day my body is different, and then my concentration level is different. So usually I don't put time, just till I'm happy with it. before working on tunes, I just make some sound with telodrons. And yeah, so I don't put time, but I try not to skip singing. That makes me harder for the next day. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's my strategy.
Cool, great. And how about solmization? Because I saw solmization. You also analyze like do, di, you know, like
yes.
all this. And I saw that you mixed it up a little bit, the ascending with descending. So, like for example, you consciously, I saw like descending, there was D instead of Ra. Or,
Yeah,
I guess.
yes.
And going ascending, it was also like Ta or Te instead of Li, I guess. You gave these choices. Could you tell why you consciously changed this?
I avoid it to mix with La, Ra, like Li, Ri, because from my mother tongue, Korean language, we don't have this difference between L, L, R.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I found first time I tried to force myself to learn this like approach note. I should do the like flat sharp. It's very important, but my brain was so confused, and I could learn it mechanically, but there is no connection with my brain. So I had to change that part.
Yeah. Okay, so L and R. That's true. That is
Yeah.
not existing in the
Super
Korean.
interesting to hear
That's
that.
really
It's
interesting
not
part.
existing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So
Great.
everything was connected with the brain.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Cool.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to ask which exercise do you do in order to understand the harmony of a song? Like, in order to understand it, interiorize it, and then improvise over it? Like, how do you prepare yourself to improvise?
The scale with piano, that will be the basic, and I didn't put it here, but because it's so nothing normal, just noodling around with the scale and find good connection, good combination, even it's root or fifths. So that's, or like sometimes bold attempt with interval, like big leaps, but within a scale with piano. That's the first step for me.
Yeah, Flor.
Did you come to a conclusion about why singers have this tendency of avoid scatting in jam sessions?
Just we are less ready, I guess. Maybe not in the mood, let's say. Yeah, I think, obviously being ready in front of people, it costs lots of work, time, effort, a little bit crying, and then frustration. But I try to, during my research, I try not to force myself to do this because great vocalists do. Just I found that I like it. I want to try, and I want to know why I cannot do it now, or what's the method, why some people can do. So it's a matter of choice, I guess. Or, yeah. But it doesn't mean everybody should try.
Great. So I would like to thank you for answering these questions. We will be going into deliberation, and thanks everybody for being here, and also online, of course, for watching. That wraps up all our Jazz Master research presentations. Thank you, Nadine.